Welcome to episode 7 of Marked Out Radio. I'm Sean.
And I'm Dana.
And in our last couple episodes, we talked about the ins and outs of autograph conventions from the perspectives of both fans and promoters. And today, we're going to be joined by someone who's worn many hats in this hobby and who's innovated many different ways fans can meet performers, mostly pro wrestlers, and build their autograph collections. And so our interview with Ken Pulvidente, co-founder of K&S Wrestlefest, will be right after a quick housekeeping message. So we're going to jump right in. Marked Out Radio is presented by Marked Out Collectibles. If you're shopping for autographs, check out www.markedoutcollectibles.com. You can check out our eBay store at mark-out-collectibles or our sister eBay store at ny-collectibles. To contact us for any reason, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or visit our Facebook group, the Marked Out Collectibles Official Marketplace. So welcome, Ken. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you inviting me on. I listened to, I believe, I think you have 5 episodes so far?
The 6th one just dropped today.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think I listened to 4 or 5 out of the 6. So it's an interesting thing, and I'm glad you guys are doing it.
Cool. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, what's your history? Because we were asking people, as we talk to them, what's your history, if any, with Marked Out? I mean, we met you, I think, in like 07 or 08, something like that. But what's your history with Marked Out?
You mean as far as the platform, the message board platform?
Yeah, the board, the people. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm trying to remember exactly, but yeah, it's got to be going on 16, 17 years since I met you guys at shows. But yeah, I remember there being message boards on sites. We actually had a message board on our website for a little while, and we had like 5 people coming on, and then I just remember, I remember you guys, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but you guys put it together where it was like a message board on steroids. It was just all about the hobby. There was like 3 or 4 of you guys that were involved in it, and it was like a meeting ground, not only to talk about people that you met, but also upcoming shows. And you guys were pretty thorough with it, as far as, I mean, across the board, from pro wrestling to, to actors and everything else.
Yeah, I think that covers it pretty well.
One of the weird things about Marked Out, I always thought, compared to other, because I've been on, when I was, especially that time, in the early 2000s, I was on a bunch of message boards for various hobbies that I had and interests that I had. But Marked Out was weird. I'm going to use the word weird, I think, because most of the people who I talked, not all, but most of the people who we talked to on Marked Out were people we also saw regularly in person, which is odd. It's for the internet, it's odd.
Yeah, it had a very much of a Northeast feel, and then I think you branched out a little bit as you started promoting shows in different cities and stuff like that, and across the country. Tell me again, because I'm not, my mind is a little foggy on a lot of your history in the beginning, but I was a member of it, and I was a regular member of it.
You were,
posting. I know that times have changed now, and everything's different now. I remember Dana used to get a little pissed off at people if they rubbed him the wrong way.
Just a bit.
Yeah, just a bit. And I think I got on Dana's nerves a couple times because I always, I think back then you guys had a different look on it, and you probably can appreciate maybe now some of the stuff that some of the regular vendors were saying back then.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because that's a big part of what we wanted to talk about. How I guess, and Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of saw ourselves almost as the opportunity to advocate purely from the fan perspective. You know what I mean? In that context, so like, I don't care what you're paying. I don't care. You're making promises. You better keep them. That was it was very much a piss and vinegar kind of atmosphere back then.
There was 2 sides. There was 2 sides. There were the promoters, and then they were the super collectors. Yep. And both sides tried to get over their point of view, and neither of them really saw the other person's point of view as far as
No, not
what the
really.
promoter had to put together and what the fan was dedicated and looking to do. And I mean, I say to this day, like I'm very different than a lot of people that have come into the wrestling world, and I am 99.9% wrestling. So like I'm not a collector. I'm a huge wrestling fan, but I'm not a collector. And I mean, I felt that back then I thought, for me it was strictly it was always been a profit to loss type of thing. And I remember there were other promoters that at conventions at the time that I think had less tact than me, that would get that would get on other people's nerves even more. Some of the stuff I agreed they said, because a lot of you guys didn't understand what it took to run some of these things and to talk to talent and deal with talent and stuff like that. But I loved Marked Out for that. I thought it was a meeting ground for everybody to come together, promoters, vendors, fans. It was great for the industry at that time. There was a period of time when, and I told this Dana when he's visited the Sportatorium several times, that when you guys hit your peak when everybody was fighting and going nuts and going after class. And I get it. It could be a little distracting to what you guys were doing, but I remember you guys being so popular as far as the people around here. I don't know what year that was about. I want to say somewhere between what, 08 and maybe 2010, 2012.
I would say that's probably the peak. 08 to 11 is like the peak.
I think that was around it. Yeah.
Yeah. And people, I mean, and then you guys decided to have these rules: 3 strikes. We're going to hand you a card, a red card, a yellow card, a blue card. We're going to, and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, wait a minute. You're taking a little bit of the fun out of it. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, and I think Dana's admitted this, that I think soon after you did those numbers, it started to go downhill. And maybe that was for several reasons. That might have also been because the technology was changing, but you tell me.
Well, I think the funny thing is, and there's sort of an interesting, almost what happened to Marked Out is almost like what a metaphor for what happened to the hobby generally, right? In the sense that years ago, and I have a whole list of questions, but years ago when you wanted to, book talents and work with talents, it was a little bit of a Wild West. It was kind of no man's land, and you would, everything was very sort of unstructured. And that's kind of what Marked Out was. It was a very unstructured Wild West, yes. Anything goes. But then, like anything else, once it's something that I don't know if, all you guys realize this, but to this day, when we go places, people will say stuff. It happened last night. We went to see Russell Crowe, and some literally, I'm not joking about this, some random dude outside of, the venue for Russell Crowe says to Dana, "Oh, I recognize you." And this is, now the heyday of Marked Out is now over a decade in the past.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't really matter. And so, like, once you start getting recognized in public, and then right away you got I can't be associated necessarily with all of the shenanigans, because some of the shenanigans were completely unhinged,
Yeah,
they were. And that was tough to police, because then you're like, I got to tell you, like, I looked at it back then, and if you were going to equate this to wrestling, your Class 16 was Roddy Piper in 1984 WWF. I mean, he was your ticket seller. He was the guy that was moving the needle, and he was the guy that people wanted to hate on. And he gave you and believed everything he said was what he believed, and people loved getting on him.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting though about him, and I don't want to devote the whole thing to him, but like, I think that people sometimes forget that he's a person, almost, and so there was a lot of stuff where people were like very cruel to him in out off the internet and in the real world in ways that were like,
definitely blood over.
Stuff was starting to happen in real life, and we would see some of these guys where it's funny to talk to them and joke about them online, and then when you see them in real life, and you're like, man, this guy. Some of these guys have a hard life in some ways,
Sure.
and this was bleeding into their life. But this is a downer. I don't mean to go that direction because I love those guys. Those guys are our whack pack in some ways,
Yeah.
They made a lot of this fun, and going and seeing them at shows was always a lot of fun. We had a little cast of characters, but it's funny you mentioned that you're not a collector. So I mean, there are a lot more conventional ways. Pardon the pun, but there are a lot more conventional ways to make money. How the heck did you land on this?
Just from being such a fan. I mean, I'm not your normal fan. Like, I mean, there's not a wrestler for the most part that you could say obscure that worked, a territory in, 1978 Portland, Oregon that I wouldn't have, heard of. And I always thought every fan was like me. I thought every fan was like me. When I got into my first convention and stuff, I thought, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, I'll put on, this guy, because all fans must be like me. They all, and then I realized that was not the case. That was not the case at all. That there are a lot of fans that just watched WWE. There were just fans that just watched, WCW or ECW and WWE and didn't know anything from any other time period. And you could say a big name from, 15 years before they watched, and they would be like, I don't know who that is, or I never watched anything. And that was eye-opener to me. And that was one of my first big lessons when I ran conventions, that there's a lot of different fans out there. There's a lot of different fans out there that have different levels of fandom for wrestling. But me, I was all-encompassing. I watched everything, and I watched from all time periods, and I just loved it so much that I wanted to get involved in something. Money was at the time, money was second to me. I always said if I could make my money back or lose a little bit, I would be happy doing this. And that was the way it was, I'd say, for about maybe a year and a half. And then at that point I said, profit's number one. I really don't give two shits anymore if I meet these people.
So in the beginning, I think when you first started with booking guys. I guess the term that would best be used to classify what you were doing was like vending at cons at the beginning. We said it's fair.
No, I never vended. The first thing I ever did was run a wrestling convention with absolutely no experience, not 1 ounce of experience running a signing at a pizza shop or a bagel store or in my backyard. It was straight to a convention with like a $35,000 budget.
Wow.
And it failed miserably.
And that was what you ran. It failed miserably. So I guess the question was, reflecting on that, because I think a lot of fans, again, I counting us among them at the time, knowing how the economics works with putting together a show. How do you when you're booking I guess that was one of those super ticket type shows?
Yeah, this was September of 2005.
Okay.
So I'm not sure where you guys were at that point.
Yeah, I think
I didn't come in until 07. Yeah.
Okay. So this was both of you 07?
Around there, yeah. It was Jason Blaustein's Turnbuckle. That was my first con.
Okay. So I ran my first show probably about 2 years before you guys started into this. And when I got into it, again, I had a little bit of an influx of money at the time, and I was married with young kids, very young kids. And I, for lack of a better word, I browbeat my wife into allowing me to put money into a wrestling convention. It was my dream. Tell me if I'm getting off subject on this.
No, this is exactly what we want to talk about.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah. So I said, okay, she bent for it and said, okay, if you think you know what you're doing. I said, well, not really, but I didn't tell her that. And and I said, I've been friends with Steve, the S of K&S. As you know, you guys both have met him multiple times.
Yeah, a million times. Yeah.
And he was friends with me since I think it was WrestleMania 4 we met, whatever year that was. And we would always keep in contact, and we would, even though he's several years older than me, we did tape trading back in the late '80s, early '90s, and I found that he lived very close to me, so we traded some tapes, and we started getting the Wrestling Observer newsletter and doing those things, and we always talked about wrestling, and I'd pick up the newsletter from him, and we would share it and whatever. And I started saying, I'd really like to do a convention. At that point, my first convention I ever went to was Tommy Fierro's show in Totowa, and I fell in love with the idea. I was like, I think that might have been 2003 or 4.
I think a lot of people were. I think you could say a lot of people kind of were introduced to this idea from Tommy Fierro. He's pretty much the godfather of this stuff.
Yeah. Yes. So I looked at it and I'm like, wow, this is like holy like you got to remember at that period of time, you didn't really run into these guys like you do now. I mean, there was no conventions. Tommy Fierro, I never heard of anything before, and I'm sitting in a room and I couldn't believe that Ricky Steamboat was like right there, and Bobby Heenan was right there, and Kevin Von Erich was right there. It was, and Kevin Von Erich, the Von Erichs were like huge to me, and I'm just like, this is unbelievable. And I went to 2 or 3 of his shows as a fan, and I said to myself, I'm wondering maybe I should do this. And then the community, I branched out. I saw Legends of the Ring was doing a show, and I went to one of their shows. It was the one that had Bad News Brown. And
yes, that would have been 5, I think. I think it was about 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think that's
my first Legends was 6 or 7. So yeah.
Okay, actually, I went to the one before that then, because that was after my convention, the one with Bad News Brown. I remember now. So I went to maybe 4, number 4, maybe it was, or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, now these guys were, I get along with those guys now, but they didn't want to talk to you about anything.
That's what I wanted to talk about. Actually, was that. Let's finish this, but I wanted to talk about sort of how you get in to a business that is notoriously very secretive and people do not share with each other at all. So finish your thing, and then we'll get into that aspect of it.
Yeah. So I was at the, and I went to the convention and I said, okay, you know what? I think I can do this. So I got the backing from my wife. I had my right-hand man, Steve, I love Steve, but he is frugal to say the best, the best. And I knew he wasn't going to put money into it, but he said, I'll be there to help you run it and do whatever you want to do. And I said, okay, that's good, because I need somebody I could fully trust. And I went out there, and I'm going to say it's a little hazy at this point how I did it, but I contacted several wrestlers. For the best way I can say it, is that from what I remember, they all fed off of each other. Somehow, I got in touch with Dennis Condrey, which got me Bobby Eaton, of course, easy enough to talk to him. And then somehow that fed into the Fantastics, who I didn't book for the show, but I did talk to them. And then somebody fed into Magnum TA. And then I think I saw one guy at a convention, and he gave me his number, and that fed off to a different guy, and Magnum fed off into Nikita Koloff, and then somebody gave me Terry Funk's number, and it kind of, for lack of memory on this fully, it was just a feeding thing. One guy fed off to the next guy, which still continues to this day, and I just fed off from wrestler to wrestler, or I finally had some sort of person who was in it that would talk to me and gave me a number. I just remember just feeding on top of it. Like that.
So when you were thinking about booking that first con or two, was it really a matter of you booked who you had access to, or did you have sort of a game plan for how you were going to put that roster together?
I had a game plan for the show. I had absolutely no realization that it was going to make money. I thought it would make money like hand over fist. I thought it'd be great, just based on absolutely no data. just because of what I saw and I witnessed at these other shows. They said, "Oh, I was so head over heels in meeting these guys that I said everybody's going to love this. Everybody's going to want to see these guys because you just never saw these guys like this before." And I just said, "I'm so." Unfortunately, a lot of the people that I fed off of, I ended up booking them right away when they really weren't good for the area, because I felt like I had to because I got the number from one guy and then that other, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. You owe him, right?
Yeah. So, was Condrey and Bobby Eaton good for 2005 in Melville, Long Island? Probably not as my first guest. Nikita Koloff, Magnum TA? Probably not. Probably not good as my first guest. Terry Funk, fine. I had the Dudley Boys, they were fine. I had Bobby Heenan, fine. I had Jerry Lawler, that was fine. So that's kind of how it went along, and there was some people that I shouldn't have booked, and there was people that I, in theory, would be fine for the show. Yeah, and then I ended up just saying to myself, okay, well, now I got to figure out what I'm supposed to pay these guys, and that was also trial and error.
I imagine the first go round, you just pay them what they ask, right? Which is just now like completely verboten. Yeah,
it's so weird that some of these guys, what they asked for at the time, I was like, that's it. Like, I didn't say that to them, but I was like, that's it. Like, wait a minute, didn't I just I remember watching you in the Omni in Atlanta on television in front of 25,000 fans. You're telling me that's all you want to come to do this?
I mean, I imagine, and you don't what your comfort level is in sharing, but I imagine in that era, a lot of these guys to book them would probably be in the neighborhood of like $500. Right?
Oh, yeah. Well, you're talking 20 years ago, and I mean, I have no problem because some of these people have passed. Bobby Heenan was $1,000.
Yeah,
and I $1,000 back then was I knew it was a substantial number to me. But then I said to myself, wait a minute, $1,000? And this guy, was out in WrestleMania 3 with Andre? Like, no, he's got to want more than that, And I think the highest was the Dudleys and Jerry Lawler at the time. They were, I think, around 2,500. The Dudleys are the Dudleys at the time, they were about 2 months off of WWE TV.
Yes, they still had a little money in their pocket.
Well, they had that, and they were fresh off TV. And then I thought them, and they worked me on the phone, or at least Bubba did, and said, "Oh, we're right off TV. This is going to be our first ever show." And to this day, Bubba's his biggest fan. So,
absolutely,
he was going to, I was ripe for the pickings for him. And I went along with it at the time. I honestly, I wouldn't say I got too abused on the prices. One story, and I love the guy. I've had him in my building 4 times. I remember I talked to Greg Valentine, and Greg Valentine was like, "Yeah, I want $1,500," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I don't know if I can pay that." And then he goes, "Well, I could probably do it for $1,000." And I'm like, "Well, let me let you know, Greg." And he goes, "Well, I guess if it's just that, I could do it for $750." And then I'm like, "Okay,
keep talking, man. Keep talking."
Yeah, soon you'll be paying me. So there was a lot of that. I will say this: I picked it up very quickly after that first show. That what to pay and what not to pay, and who was pulling my chain and who wasn't, and I would say I was pretty bad the first show, even though I don't think there was anything too crazy that I paid. But yeah, I definitely learned.
So a lot of I know bookings now, a lot of them center on not only what you're paying the guy and what you're expecting to make day of. A lot of it is sort of also negotiating how many extra pieces you're going to get for the deal. That's like a big thing now, and I think a lot of fans don't really understand that that's now sort of part of the package, so to speak. Was that part of your consideration back then? Were you thinking that those first couple cons, were you thinking, I'm going to get inventory on these guys too, that I can, make money on the back end,
Yeah.
or was your head not even in that space?
Well, Dana might actually appreciate this. This is a fun little fact. The building I'm in right now for the Sportatorium used to be a print shop, and they printed my photos for my convention in 2005.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, it's very weird that, it kind of went full circle like that. But when I made photos, the photos were absolutely horrendous. They were on cardstock. They were pixelated. I didn't even think that mattered.
Yeah.
At the time, I was like, who cares? Can you, people don't care. It was so different back then. It was so different. And you could get away with half-assed pixelated photos. You could get away with a lot of things. As far as having stock in the back end, I did have people sign stuff, and I actually had, up until when I started doing virtuals, I still had some stuff from the original show. I think all of it's gone now. But I did have some, I didn't negotiate any of that, except the Dudley Boys. I didn't negotiate any of that. I just thought that they would sign it. And a lot of the guys did sign it. Mm-hmm. And then there was Without Question, and then there were guys that I knew signed half of it. But by the end of that show, the last thing on my mind was how much backstock I got. I wanted to go home, take a shower, and cry. So
I mean, if it was that bad, you kept going. You kept going.
I kept going. Yes. That show was at that time about between a $15,000 and $18,000 loss. Which I have no problem saying, because I felt like I was learning on my own feet. Right? You paid
$18,000 for an education, is what happened.
Yes, and I've made money tenfold. So much since then that you're right. I paid for an education, and go ahead.
So what's interesting is, you talked about your collaboration a little bit with Steve. You mentioned a little bit. You mentioned the Legends guys. I know that in today's the reality of it is, over the years you've collaborated with a lot of different vendors, a lot of different promoters in various ways. On deals and stuff. This business, we've only been doing it for a short time, but we realize it's kind of interesting in that you have people who in certain contexts are super competitive with each other, and then in another context they're collaborating on a deal. So I guess the question is, where does competition end and collaboration begin when it comes to promoters and vendors in this space? Because it does seem, famously, like if you think of the big cons in this area, there was like this long-standing feud between a bunch of the cons and stuff like that. So again, at the same time, a lot of these guys who are feuding are also, I know for a fact, working together on back-end deals to bring in, high-value guests. So I guess, where does competition end and collaboration begin, and how do you work with people who, in some ways, you were publicly also sort of competing with?
Well, basically, it was like the wrestling world. To be honest with you, it was like one minute, the guy turns on you and hits you with a steel chair, and the next minute you're tag teaming together. So and that's very much how it was. To be honest with you, there were guys I was never going to do business with, and then there were guys that to this day I do business with, that I started with. Honestly, it goes by people's personalities and who you groove with and who you don't. And some of it was my fault. I had a bigger chip on my shoulder back then. I was a lot younger then. So I wasn't as mellowed as I was in the last several years. So part of that was my fault. I take ownership, and a lot of that stuff I was with, but there were people that I just became friends with. Mike from High Spots is one of the most honest guys out there. I've been consistently doing business with him since basically the first show I had in Melville.
Yeah, we've joked that Mike, in some way, High Spots in some ways is almost like the Walmart of the wrestling autograph hobby.
Yeah, they really
in terms
are.
of the stock they have, the quantity you have, the money they have. You really can't. In certain ways, it's almost impossible to compete with them. You kind of have to collaborate with them, or because they can just outprice you any way they want.
Yeah, but Mike will never do that. Really, he's not really vindictive, and he's not really worried about what the next guy does. Um, he's also well off enough where, unlike a lot of other vendors, you're never really going to see him do a fire sale because he's got to pay his mortgage.
Right.
And that's what I like about him too. And I've been guilty of doing fire sales to pay the mortgage. But I appreciate a guy like him who doesn't do that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And because it protects the business.
So we were talking about your first couple shows and with the cons. So cons back then, back in 05, 06, 07, 08, pretty much up until fairly recently, were super ticket driven. So I will explain that to the people who might not know what that is. So a super ticket would mean basically the con itself would book, the promoter itself, like Ken, would book a certain number of guests. And I mean, I think it would be anywhere from say 12 to 15 to 18 guests, depending on the size of the show. And then it was like a pay one price. You would pay say $200 or $250, whatever it was, and then you would get one autograph and one photo op from each of those guests. And that was pretty much how wrestling cons were run for years until they weren't. So I guess what were the conditions that kind of created that model, and then what conditions changed so that model just disappeared?
Well, I always ran it on a super ticket basis. Everything I did, I ran on a super ticket basis. And the reason I did it on a super ticket basis is because you stole ideas from who did it before you. And Tommy Fierro, I believe, was a super ticket basis.
Yep.
Legends of the Ring was a super ticket basis. I don't think there was anybody...
George did them. Sinomania did them too, yeah.
Sinomania was after me. I did a show before Sinomania. And then I took from Mambo, and I think Mambo Rivera, if you remember him,
Wrestle Reunion, I think they were called.
Yes, he did a super ticket as well. So I believe that I just did super tickets because everybody else was doing them. So you felt, well, I guess that's the way you do it. And I think it worked well for a while. And I think people got trained to do that. And it just wasn't here. It wasn't just with those shows and the shows that I ran or the shows other promoters ran. I mean, Greg Price was doing it in Charlotte, and there was people doing it, in other states and cities. I just said to myself, I think what happened was, I think the model died because just oversaturation. There's just oversaturation of the same guests, and people were not willing to support the $200 or $300 super ticket when they would only need a couple from, really just a couple from that list. And
I think part of it though is the fact that the booking cost of these guests started to basically double each year too.
I don't know of anybody who was doing a super ticket at the end unless that was Legends of the Ring. I don't know who else was really doing it where the costs got totally out of whack. Because they're the last guys that I knew that did a super ticket and also abandoned it, maybe 3-4 years ago? 5 years ago?
I think so, yeah. Whatever they I think their last con or two were not super ticket. Or something
was there anybody else that was regularly doing super tickets that was regularly running wrestling conventions? I can't.
George stopped.
George has been gone for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Legends, that last one when they dropped the super ticket, I believe that was it. Everyone else had moved on from that.
Well, model. I think also then you had then High Spot started with WrestleCon, and they were never super ticket. It was vendor only. No. And also Tommy with Big Event was also vendor only.
And that's true. That's true. I also think, and Tommy's another one, and like High Spots, we're dealing with people, I believe, who have a little bit of a deeper pockets than some of the other people we mentioned, including myself. And I think that those people were able to drop a much higher price on a individual guest where other people couldn't. And I think that's, if you look at Big Event's lineup, I mean, they have a lot of guests that are very high priced. And honestly, to be honest with you, I still like the idea of a super ticket in some ways. Do I think it will work anymore? Probably not. But if you have the deep pockets to invest, and I'm not joking with these numbers, If you have the deep pockets to invest almost $100,000 into 4 or 5 different names, then that may be your better route.
It's interesting because I remember there was a Sinomania show where the super ticket had Dusty Rhodes, all three of Hall, Nash, X-Pac, Roddy Piper. These guys were all on the same super ticket.
Yeah, you would fall on the floor right now if I told you what those guys were charging.
No, I know how much. It's not sustainable to run a super ticket.
It wouldn't work. It would not work.
Yeah. No, if those guys were all alive right now, Dusty and Roddy Piper and those guys, I could only imagine what their asking prices would be.
Yeah.
That's it's interesting how that's kind of segue into. So I guess we kind of touched on this before. I want to dig a little bit into it. There had to be a little bit of intrigue and obfuscation. I know back then the culture in the business was not really to share information with each other. It was kind of the opposite. You wanted to hoard information for yourself because information was power. So I mean that has changed, right? Today, today a lot of the talent have agents where they're advertising who's available. You have talents can be contacted on social media very easily. You don't need to kind of find someone's number. So how has that sort of changed your process for figuring out who you're going to book and how it's going to work?
Well, I mean, for me, I always had a listing of guys I got the hard way, from one guy to another. So I always had that list. As far as securing newer guys, you're right. Some of it you're just going to go through an agent. There's still some trading. There's still some trading. Hey, can I get that number? Or something that still happens. And be honest with you, I love the guy, and he's a vendor, but I'm not going to name him, but every time I ask for somebody, occasionally he has to get something back from me. Like, okay, well, if I'm going to give that, you got to give something, something I'm going to ask. And
I could probably guess who you're talking about. It's not that much of a surprise. So, but go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, I don't know if you would guess it, but it's one of those things where you still deal with it. Definitely it's cut down because of social media. You can contact people on social media, if you're talking about the newer people. If you're trying to get, the last remnants of some territory star from that's, 80 years old now that wrestled in, 1970s and the early 80s, you might have to do some real digging on that, and that's not going to really work on social media. It's gone. If that answers your question, yes, all that stuff has lessened the need for people to be as guarded as they were.
So I guess because we've run into interesting conversations and stuff. So a lot of guys and girls now have agents. This is something that just simply was not a thing back in 2005. So what are your thoughts about the proliferation of agents? How has that sort of affected the attitude of guests and your ease of dealing with them?
There is some small advantages to dealing with an agent. There are one agent that I do decent amount of business with who I think is very good. I feel that he walks a good tightrope between the client and the vendor. There are a lot of vendors or agents out there that have absolutely no respect for the vendor, that don't give two craps about the vendor. There's a lot of guys that are double dipping that want to be a vendor and an agent. And that is a conflict of interest because you'll have guys that say, I represent A and B, but I'm also bringing A and B to every Comic-Con under the sun. So they will sometimes hoard the talent and have less of a need to book that talent out to a vendor like me because he doesn't want to flood the market on the guy he's getting a percentage of at these Comic-Cons.
Right, and it's something that and Dana, you can chime in on this too. I think that when also the with these agents come with a much more guarded approach towards like how many extras they sign and what are they signing? Are they signing figures or just prints or just these were conversations that really were not had in the past, and all of a sudden, everything is litigated now through an agent.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where the agents came from so fast. I don't know how that happened. I'm assuming that happens just from we're going through an age change of the stars, and the younger people are just going with that.
Yeah.
Because I can call Tito Santana right now and he'll answer the phone. But if you call some random person at NXT that wrestled 3 matches, and got let go a year ago, she wants you to talk to her agent. Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, it's kind of like when we wanted Mikey or Hack, you just text them and work it out, right? If you want exactly some rando from NXT, it becomes a whole protracted negotiation with am I selling? What am I doing? And which I have to approve photos and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, just recently, and our involvement compared to Ken's involvement was apples and sand, basically completely different. But like Joe Hendry, a big up and coming guy now, he's rising. Yeah. I had we had a private set through Jerry Sorrentino, and that was that was a lot of moving parts to get that all configured. It didn't used to be like that even when I first started a couple years ago. Forget Ken's experience. It's changing.
Yes, it's changed a lot. And I believe it's one of those things where it just, again, people are feeding on top of each other. They're talking in the back of AEW or even Impact or WWE, and they're saying to themselves, X, Y, and Z represents me, and you don't have to talk to these people that are going to get your phone and do this. Just have them go through it, and
it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy for the people that are collecting a paycheck if they're working for AEW. Definitely, they're like that. I sorry if I cursed, but you can if I'm on AEW and I'm making $150,000 a year and you're bottom level talent, sure I'm going to have some guy just run interference on that. It's when they have nowhere to go, then you start to see them creep out a little bit more from behind that.
Although it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are certain agents in particular who are able to cling to unsigned talent because they're sort of dangling the promise of having an inside track to getting them signed again.
Well, yeah, I bet there is. I mean, again, that everything's a con. So whether it's true or not, they could be saying that. They could be saying that. There's all types. Like I said, there's all types of agents out there. I don't really want to name any because I don't want any backlash on me. But there's like I said, there's guys that they will. There are guys out there that won't even return your phone call, and you're offering the price that they would normally ask. How does that make sense?
It does.
That they can't even get back to you. I've literally left messages where I said, I have money. Take my money. Just call me back. And they either don't call you. If you run into them, they're like, well, I'm like, well, how is this working for the talent? How
are you representing their financial interests, right?
Yeah, but then you realize what they're doing, because it goes back to that they're playing vendor and they're playing agent. And the one agent I deal with plays, as of now, he plays 100% agent. And that is not a conflict of interest because he's not looking to have a vendor table next to you.
Yet.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So I know, because we were talking about signing extras. So in your early days, and you mentioned this before, the extras they were signing, the 8x10s, they were largely, I don't think I'm saying anything controversial, they were largely worthless. Even some of the big name guys, 15, 20 years ago, a Bobby Heenan 8x10, you'd smile when you sold one for $5 because there was no real perceived secondary value for any of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, I guess this is almost like a post-COVID thing. A lot of this stuff that had long really been deemed kind of worthless has suddenly has value. right?
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I agree that a lot of it didn't have a lot of value in my mind, but it had more of a value in my mind than some people did, because I always had my guests on extras. Going through, the 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and going on. I always had people. If I had extra photos, I would try to get them to sign stuff, because I would just throw it in a pile in a box,
Right.
and I knew that. It had some sort of value, and at the time, I was running my life was very hand to mouth, so you know I would put the stuff on eBay, and I would do a lot of 10 photos for $40 or whatever it was, and I'd keep putting these things up, and I'd make 4 or 5 sales a week, and I'm like, oh, okay, I just got $200, I can buy groceries for the week. So I I always had more of a value. There are vendors out there right now, guys that did stuff, in the early the 2010 and on, that are out there that they wouldn't even have guys sign much extras. They'd be like, "Oh, this is worthless. This is worthless." And I remember when COVID started, and I was starting to do my virtuals, I contacted some of these people, and I said, "Okay, sell me your
Everything.
stuff. Sell me your stuff."
And so now, pretty much every deal that you make, you have to stipulate the extras they'll sign, right?
Yes. Well, what you mean with the talent?
Yeah.
No, not everybody. Not everybody.
How about this? A significantly greater proportion than in the past.
Yes, and yes. Even with the older talent, it depends again on a name. If I book Tugboat is going to sign without blinking an eye. Now, if I book Tito Santana, who used to sign whatever you put in front of him, he's like, Ken, I'll sign 20 extras. Okay, Tito, whatever you want to do. So and then the newer people, it's become a negotiation with some of these agents. Yes,
For sure.
and I want to say this, and I've said this multiple times to people, because you have a lot of these old timers before me who still think that a guy's autograph should be $5, and I'm just to get on bulk, and I'm just like, does everybody realize that we are the reason? We are the reason. The vendors, the eBay market, we are the reason why talent has put a limit on what they sign and has paid more attention to this. We are the direct reason, because anybody, young especially, can put their name into eBay and they can pull up and see 60 different people selling their photos. Now, they don't see what is sold.
Right.
They just
So
see,
if they didn't sell anything, exactly.
They just see somebody putting up $15, $20, $30, all different shots. And they don't say to themselves, oh, yeah, I got paid for that 6 months ago. They go, somebody's making money off me.
Yeah.
Somebody's making money off me. Now, back in the old day, before eBay was all over, and also Marketplace, Facebook as well, is now more into that. Facebook Marketplace, virtuals, whatever. Back in the day, it was anonymous. When I used to get extras, I'd go to some local independent show and I'd throw them on a table. It was never accessible to the wrestler, to see their stuff being, danced in front of them.
Yeah,
So,
that's a really good point. That's not to keep going back to Joe Hendry, but yesterday I was with Joe, and he's going through my stuff. He's signing, and he's saying, like, how much were you charging for this? Where do you sell it? Like, he's very, like you said, in the old days, it was all anonymous. There, he can open up any of these apps, and he can see, and that's like the perception of that's money being made that I'm not making. It's very different now, and that is the reason why it's all more business oriented, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, eBay has and Facebook marketplaces, when you put it in the public eye, that means you're going to the customer who's going to buy, and you're also going to the people who you necessarily don't want to see you doing this. So it's open for business for everybody to feast their eyes on. And that is one of the reasons why people have limited numbers on their stuff, and also people have risen their prices.
But doesn't that in some way? I mean, let's be honest though. Their view is a little bit distorted, right? Because I mean, because look, we booked Hack, and he's arguing, fighting about signing every extra, and
Sure.
and we're like, listen, you made $900 today, and that was less than your
Sure.
booking fee. We have to come up to zero somehow, right? So what are you doing, right?
Yeah.
There's sort of a weird delusion I think some of these people have, whether it's their ego or whether it's their agent whispering in their ear or whatever the case may be. For some of them, it depends, but that they have sort of a distorted view of what their value really is.
They have a distorted value because if you're taking a guy like Hack, Hack's not really following eBay and he's not looking at this. What he sees is probably with him, and it probably goes right out of his head as fast as it came into his head. It's just he just doesn't want people making more money on him than he feels that maybe they should make. And there's not a real lot of thought process or rationale or making sense with a guy like Hack. So you got to take him as a little bit of a separate.
All right. So even if let's put Hack to the side. So I'll use another one as an example because I mean we have a couple of these now. I'm going to use him as an example. I don't care. He's a nice guy, but he rubbed me the wrong way. So we used Lindsay Dorado once,
Sure. Yeah.
And he was another one who had a very kind of oddly distorted view of what his value was, and when it came time to have someone do a bulk at the table to try and make some money back because we were not going to break even on him, he right away got an attitude. Or I just think it's just an interesting thing where you can work the fans, right? That's where we're all kind of working the fans to some extent. They're putting on a show for the fans, but they're trying to work their employers too a little bit. Yeah. And I think that you have to kind of be, and you're kind of been a master at this. You've kind of been firm on, listen, you want my employment again, you got to do what I need to make money, or else you're not getting paid again. So you can try your shenanigans now, but it'll come back to hurt you in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but with me, that only goes so far with who I'm booking. If I tried that with certain people, they would laugh in my face. But then there's other guys that will say, "Oh yeah, whatever you need," it's or you have relationships with. But it all depends on your. I've always said that every wrestler I've worked with is a little bit different. They're a little bit different. They're a little bit, some are very, very on your side. There are some that do not want you to make a dime on them. They know that you're in a business arrangement, and they still don't want you to make a dime on it.
And you think that's because there are so many vendors who are willing to book and take a loss just for the chance of sitting next to them and hanging out for a couple hours?
I think it's just human personality. I think some of these people think they're saying to themselves, "No, there's no way you didn't make money. You're bullshitting me." They think
they assume you're lying, basically.
Yes,
because they're lying.
Yeah, and a lot of times we are lying, and a lot of times they're lying, and a lot of times everybody's lying. So it's just one, round circle of everybody bullshitting to the other. And I believe there's a lot of wrestlers that say to themselves, "Oh, that's bullshit. They didn't make money." I just, so I saw 15 people come up and what were they charging? $30. And then a lot of these wrestlers, they have this idea that you could sell their autograph after the fact for what you charged when they were sitting right there.
Totally delusional. Yeah.
They say, "Oh, you sold 30. I signed for you 20 photos. Well, what were you charging at the table?" "I was charging 30. "Oh, well then I sold, you got 20.
$600.
You're gonna get that. But instead, what you're really gonna get is $10. So if you're lucky. So and they don't want to hear that. They don't want to see that. It's one, and we got to remember, wrestling too is also based on lies, fabrication, pulling the wool over people's eyes. So it's all about working people. Nobody believes the other guy, and that goes to the vendors.
We were actually joking the other day that if you go to a vendor and you say, "How'd you do on him?" and he said, "I broke even," that means he lost $1,000, right?
Yeah,
sure. Or you walk into a wrestling independent show. What's the crowd here? "Oh, we always do about 400, and you count the fans. There's 150. Yeah. It's all based on bullshit. It's all based on I've never met a vendor. Well, I've had some people, but most vendors never lose. Everybody breaks even. Everybody, you're right. That's just the way it is. It's always been like that. But keep going. Whatever you guys want to ask.
Oh yeah. So now your business, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you've basically converted your business to almost exclusively direct retail. So you do sort of virtual signings live, but you're basically just selling retail directly. So what challenges come with being an autograph retailer, and how does that differ from being a promoter?
Well, when it comes to, I mean, I basically I sell from my Facebook page, my virtuals, So I still consider myself a promoter because I'm promoting whatever I'm running, and I got to do a lot of work to get the word out there. But I do like the fact you very rarely will you see me go to a convention if it's not extremely local because you have all these fixed costs of table and rent and table cost and gas tolls, possible hotel for yourself, and then you're in the thing for $600-700, and then you got to tack that on to whatever cost it is to bring in the talent. So I tend to stay away from that model. For me, it doesn't make much sense to do that. I have a building where I pay very, very little to use, and I have built the thing with the virtuals that in some ways I think I'm like one of the last guys standing that's really doing live virtuals with talent on a regular
pretty much
weekly basis. I know there's several that still do it, but I don't think a lot do it consistently. And the only reason I'm successful at it, and there's two reasons why I'm successful, I believe. My main strength is one, I feel like I know what to charge. I also feel like I know what to pay guys, and I work very hard at promoting it, getting sales in, and getting the product to the fan. That is my main reasons I think I do good. As far as my weaknesses, it's technology. Technology is where, I'm in the dark ages. I don't know if I'm getting off the beaten course on that.
No, it's interesting because one of the things that when we're talking about how do we grow our business and how do we, a lot of times we're looking and we're seeing who we're competing with, and let's be honest, you and we're not really competing with each other. You have this huge client base and you do way more volume than we do. We're much more niche, and so but I'm looking at the people who I am competing with and who we are competing with, and I'm looking sometimes, I'm like, you know what, the product that we produce, it's objectively a higher quality product that's at a lower cost. And something like, how do I make sure that what I'm putting out there is reaching enough people where they see it and they'll buy from me as opposed to the guy up the block? And I guess that's a question for all retailers. Why does one retailer succeed when another one doesn't? So it's an interesting. We'll go a little bit controversial now, not too controversial. I think it's not that controversial because we both wholeheartedly agree with what your position is here, but it's something I think it's worth talking about. So you have this incredibly vast inventory you've built up over the years of stuff from your signings, your bookings, your cons, your virtuals, everything. You have this huge inventory, and so when you're dealing with wrestlers or any celebrities really, but wrestlers in particular, it is not uncommon, and it's sort of an inevitability that these guys will die. Mm-hmm. And sometimes then you have without fail, there are these people who jump up as soon as someone dies and start screaming about, well, you can't sell their stuff now that they're dead because that's exploitative. Yes. So I, whenever I've seen you talk about this and write about it, it's always, to me, very eloquent and very logical. So just can you just explain to people why you sell stuff when someone that you don't feel any compunction or you don't feel any problem with selling something after someone dies?
Yeah, well, I'm going to say this first. There's a lot of other vendors, big vendors, other smaller vendors that agree with me, but don't sell stuff because they don't want to rock the boat. Most of the times I'm not one of the guys. There are guys out there that as soon as they hear of someone passing, they're running through their file cabinets and they're getting stuff up as fast as they could, and they're tacking on a price to it. I'm not one of those guys that does that on a regular basis because, and Dana can attest to this. One of the reasons is I don't know where half the shit is in this business.
That is true.
Yes. And the other part of it, the other reason I don't do it is because I can slightly see the point when it comes to certain talent. When it comes to other talents, I don't see it. And in general, I really don't see it. But with certain talents, certain people, I could hear your argument. I understand if it's a tragic death, Bray Wyatt. Okay? I can understand it. I could hear it. Right? If it's Iron Sheik at 83, different story. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go a step further. I think the truth of it is, whenever someone dies whose autograph is worth something, two things happen. First, the supply increases both legitimately because people like me. Like, I'll be honest, when the Ultimate Warrior died, right?
Yeah,
I had stuff of his up for sale that I couldn't move at all. That I had it listed at a loss, and I jacked the prices to the moon on all that stuff, and I sold everything I had within a couple of days. I made thousands. And then now his prices come down to earth a little bit more than what it was when he first died. I feel no reservation about that whatsoever because I'll tell you why. In addition to the legitimate ones that enter the market, once someone dies, all the forgers come out of the woodwork and start releasing. They flood the market with garbage, and then the price gets driven down artificially by the number of forgeries out there too.
Yes, but even if you don't want to get that crazy into, all the other little parts and stuff to it, just on the basis of common sense. Okay. And again, I'm not a big guy that does this all the time, but literally I was moving things around in this building. I was moving something around and these photos just appeared. It was just by luck that I moved a couple things and I saw them. And I said, you know what? Why not? Just put them up. It was 4 photos, whatever. And I knew I was going to get some backlash. And I also knew I would get a lot of people saying stuff on my side. But here's the ridiculousness of it. And I've tried, and I don't even get too into it because you can't really change people's minds. I'm not even going to use Kevin Sullivan as an example. Let's just use Iron Sheik for the example. If I work with him 2 years ago, and he signs, and I paid him his fee, and I paid him his airfare and his hotel, and I did everything I was supposed to. And he signed 30, 40 photos for me. He goes about his business. I go about my business. We live life. I don't talk to him. 2 years later, he passes away. And I have my property from a business transaction. Transaction. He got his. I have mine. This is my property. It has nothing to do with him anymore, as far as it being any way, shape, or form, his property or his anything. It's just his name written on a photo, and it's my property.
He was well compensated at the time. Yes. At a rate that I think you were very eloquent when you described this in your post about Kevin Sullivan. You paid every fee he asked for. It was something that was agreed upon. I mean, these guys are not dumb. They understand that what they sell to you becomes yours.
Yes, it's ours. It's ours. What do they think we're going to do with this stuff? Do they think we're going to just throw it in a box? Do they think that we're going to throw it up on eBay? Sure they do. Do they think we're going to sell it when they pass away? Of course they do. And if anybody puts that much effort and time into the wrestler's feelings or the family's feelings, because I'm selling a photo from 1985 with their autograph on it, it's ridiculous. It's completely and utter ridiculous. It is not is it making money off of the guy's passing? Sure it is. But it's my product.
I really think, though, and I'm going to be honest, I really think that a lot of the so-called outrage about this is performative in nature. I don't think it's
absolutely. It's fake outrage. It's the same woke outrage that has affected most of this country. It is It is social media driven, and most of these people don't even believe it themselves. And most of these people who were against me, I looked at every one of their names. 3/4 of them I'm not even Facebook friends with, and a couple of them that I was Facebook friends haven't purchased anything from me ever, or purchased one thing 2 years ago. They're not customers. Now, am I taking a risk doing this, that there might be one guy that might be a customer and has a crow up his ass and believes that I'm wrong? Sure. But there has to be a stand on this. Someone has to take a stand on this.
Agreed.
You know, like,
yeah, I think it's. I mean,
it's got to become the norm where people aren't. And I've heard other vendors get on their soapbox. Oh, no. We're gonna let the body get cold before we then make our money in an upcharge. What are you kidding me? And what is this fake arbitrary amount of time? 2 weeks?
Yeah, that makes no sense. They just pick some random point on the calendar. You have to have
you know what it is. It's
full moons.
It's till certain guys can get their fakes together. And that's it's a bunch of.
It could be that. It could be, oh well, you know what? We're not in shock anymore. We're less upset. The family of Kevin Sullivan is not worried about the autographs that I'm selling.
Yeah, they're not on your page at this time looking, and
no,
it has no impact on them.
No, if they're in mourning, which I know I'm sure they are worried about other things. They're not worried about something he signed that he got compensated for. That is now up there. They're not going, holy shit, my God, they're making, $20 more on this. This is outrageous. That was the business that they were in. Yeah. That was the business that they were in. How many guys have passed away in WWE, has their footage, and aren't getting any checks?
It's true. Yeah. And the funny thing is that this is wrestling, man. Like this is a carny element you'd think the fans would be like appreciative of on some level.
Yeah. You think Iron Mike Sharp's family is getting residuals from every time one of his matches pops up on the network or some other YouTube clip or whatever? I mean, it's not happening. Yeah. They got compensated. They're trying to make out this relationship to be bigger than what it was. Like it was a business relationship. Okay. They signed their name. They didn't give me a love letter or how they felt about things. They signed their name on a photo that is circulating all over the entire business. It's like, I don't even, it kills me that this is that way. And here's the kicker too, is that, and I posted this, and if anybody doesn't believe me, I donated to Kevin's GoFundMe. I donated to his GoFundMe. I saw a lot of people on there that were complaining about me selling a photo that didn't donate to his GoFundMe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think, look, whether you did donate or didn't, the bigger picture is you're selling your own stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff, yeah. There is a momentary bump in interest because someone made the news, right? There is at the same time, there is a realization that there is now a finite amount of product on the market. So the price is going to naturally go up a little bit. I can't wrap my head around why people have a problem with it. I just don't get it.
Yeah. So, it's just the fake outrage. And let's be honest.
Very fake.
Every single autograph, every piece of inventory we have, it's like a stock certificate. Like every single person. Like, why would I want to unload my stock at any other time than that peak? If you could tell, like, this is the peak, it's only going to go down from here. Why would I not sell? Like I'm fully on. I actually might be more extreme than you can. I'm fully on Sean's side. I have all my inventory on my phone and photos. If I'm out somewhere and there's an opportunity to sell something at a peak, someone gets signed, someone passes away, someone wins a title, I'm always ready to post it. And prices adjust. Yesterday's price isn't always today's price. It's all about making the most you can on the back end.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you. What about this, right? Okay. I had the Acclaimed in here when they were first just showing up on the AEW Dark.
I think I was there. I was there that day.
Okay. I paid them peanuts compared to what they would get 8 months later. Now, I had a bunch of signed photos after the fact. So I'm putting those up and I'm still selling them. Now, am I profiting off their success?
Of course you are. That's why you did it.
Yeah.
That's why you booked them.
So I'm profiting off their death. I'm profiting off their success. I'm profiting off of whatever you want to, call it. But at the end of the day, it was a business transaction. People are looking into this way much more than what it is. And honestly, I think it's some people actually believe it, that it's disrespectful. And then I think some people are just want to do the keyboard, let's join in.
Of course.
And there's also some honest, of the go ahead, Dana, sorry.
Yeah, let's be honest, like for every Ultimate Warrior where Sean made thousands, we have stacks of inventory for other people that, to be completely frank, unless they went on some sort of a headline grabbing crime spree where they wiped out an entire bus of kids, we would never sell these to break even. Like, it's just junk. So I mean, for every success there's 5 failures, so it all evens out, in my opinion.
Yeah, the most I can say to this is people need to really get a grip on this and stop with it. And I'm hoping that the tide will change a little bit. Now, again, I'm not going to put my neck out there for everybody. I mean, there are things that, I saw the hysteria from fans after Scott Hall passed. And I think I would have been, strung up on my testicles if I sold anything the day after Scott Hall passed.
You know what, though? There were other vendors who went out and they started rolling out fakes the minute Scott Hall died. So, and we don't have to go into their names, but we all know who they are. Yeah. And so, then Roddy Piper, the same thing. Bray Wyatt, the same thing. The same guys doing it for all of them. And so it's very, very hard it's very, very hard, especially in a business like this, where these guys they accepted money to sign their name. Right. You're not selling off some precious heirloom. You're not selling off something that is this unique memento. They accepted money to sign that. If you really think about these kinds of transactions that we engage in, they're kind of base transactions in the sense that there are some people who find it crazy that anyone pays for autographs just at all. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's kind of an interesting quirk. It's an interesting niche of society. And so, and there are some, they do it for a long time. Like your top A-listers and your top stars wouldn't be caught dead accepting money for their autograph. That was seen as low class or gauche or whatever. And so they didn't do it. So now, because the money's big, everyone pretty much does it. But it's this idea that this is in some way shocks the conscience or does violates social norms. It's just not based in reality. It's this weird fiction. Yeah, that they've created. So, and I will absolutely stand by that 100%. I think it's infuriating when you see criticisms of it. That's that. So the interview with Ken went really long, over 2 hours. It took me a little bit by surprise. Did you see that one coming, Dana?
I've had some great conversations with Ken in the Sportatorium, so I was hoping it would just click. But yeah, I mean, he has some great stuff to share, some great stories.
So what we're going to do is we're going to split the interview with Ken Pulvidente into 2 parts. The second part will actually air in 2 weeks during episode 9 because we have a really special report on Fanatics Fest coming up next week in episode 8. So we will air the second half of Ken's interview in episode 9. So if you're shopping for autographs, make sure you check out www.markedoutcollectibles.com, our eBay store at marked-out-collectibles, or our sister eBay store at ny-collectibles. To contact us for any reason, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Marked Out Collectibles official marketplace on Facebook. We do have a couple private signings coming up. Our big announcement was Barbara Bain from TV's Mission Impossible and Space 1999. All items and orders for Barbara Bain are due October 23rd. We also have WWE Hall of Famer, ECW co-founder Paul Heyman. All orders and items are due November 7th. So for Marked Out Radio, Marked Out Collectibles, and MarkedOut.com, I'm Sean.
And I'm Dana.
and we'll see you next week for our discussion of Fanatics Fest.